During the decade, I've been hosting anywhere from 1 to 4 podcast interviews a week. Side note here. So this is the Flipping 50 podcast. I also host She Means Fitness Business, which is your podcast if you're a health coach or a personal trainer, medical exercise specialist. So I won't say a lot more about that now, but there are 2 podcasts. There have been for a decade. But in that many interviews over the course of 10 years, never have I had the pleasure of introducing someone who calls themselves a professional interviewer. She not only is just all that, and you'll learn how she created that role herself, but you'll hear how she was at rock bottom and from it rose up, took responsibility, and changed not only hers, but thousands of women's lives through the work that she now does. I'm Deborah Atkinson, and you're listening to Flipping 50, where I share solutions to your biggest struggles and concerns. Most of all, we try to inspire you, change the way you expect to age, and raise that glass ceiling. I share what to eat, how to move, and how to change your mindset so you can have the energy and vitality that you want, need, and deserve in this second and better half. My guest today is Edwina Murphy-Droomer, the creator of A League of Extraordinary Mothers and the Unleash the Audacious Woman Within series. She released her debut book, Phenomenal Feminine Entrepreneurs, in 2021. As she moves into her 6th decade, she's turned her attention to celebrating and supporting midlife women to unlock their potential to feel stronger, healthier, and happier in every way. Having worn many hats throughout her working career, from office management to flower farmer and naturopath to talk show host, Edwina has combined the knowledge she garnered along the way to support women through a thriving coaching practice. As a graduate and avid student of hardcore leadership, Edwina's passion, compassion, humor, and style inspires women across the globe to create a compelling and enticing vision for the woman that they want to be, the things they want to do, and the legacy that they want to leave. She's a powerhouse in the fields of vision building and transformation. She has supported thousands of women to create an exciting vision for the health, wealth, time, and love they crave, and then provides the support and accountability to bring that vision to life. We are going to provide at the end of the show the link to an upcoming event hosted by Edwina. I'm going to give that to you now in case you have a mind like a steel trap and you can register for it or look at it. That is flipping50.com/extraordinary. Let's dive into this episode. Edwina, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it is an absolute pleasure, Deborah. Thank you for having me.
Well, I am the lucky one, and many of my listeners know this by now, that I am a sucker for an accent. So you had me at hello, girl. and then you bring this pretty juicy story.
Aww.
So I would love for you, just for a moment, to take us back to you, broke, single, mother with 4 children. How old were the kids, by the way, and how old were you? What were you experiencing?
Well, I actually had 4 children under 8 when my first husband packed a bag, literally one bag, and walked away. He decided that he wasn't cut out for this crazy life that we'd found ourselves in, and my youngest was 5 months old. So it was a crazy time, to be sure. And I spent 12 months really in a pretty deep pit of grief. And but in hindsight, which is always a wonderful thing, isn't it? In hindsight, I realized that it was the greatest gift in my life, because I actually had to grow up. And that sounds, it's taken me a long time to be able to say that out loud because it feels very embarrassing. But I had spent my life being looked after, and I had a very, very beautiful dad that used to pat me on my head and say, "You don't have to worry about anything, you'll get married," which is what he did for my mum. She didn't work after she got married, and that was the life that he wanted for me, and that was who I was surrounded by. That was the world that I grew up in, was that most of the mums were at-home mums. And that was what I thought was going to happen, and it didn't. And suddenly I had no support, no emotional support, no financial support, and four beautiful, amazing children, two boys and two girls. I actually had two brunettes and two blondes, and it was like this gorgeous little set. And I had to grow up and realize that they were reliant on me, and I needed to, I say, pull up my big girl pants. And that was the launching spot for me, and realizing that if we were going to create a life that I wanted for them, I had some serious responsibilities in front of me, and I had to work out how to make it happen. And that was where my life really took off from.
Wow. Okay. And I've had many of my audience members know a little bit. They've been here long enough to have heard Flipping 50 is here because of a midlife crisis. And
Yeah.
I too highly recommend it. But, my one single child was pretty well grown and left the nest when I was doing it. I can't imagine being in your shoes, really. So fast forward now.
Yeah.
You're here. By the way, listeners, she's legally okay to be here at Flipping 50. She's just entering the world, right? At the 50s. So she's one of us. She's cool.
I graduated. I think that.
Yeah, right. How much time has passed between you then and you today?
Well, I guess we're looking at my youngest, who was 5 months old, is now 14, nearly turning 15. So
Wow.
15 years.
Wow.
Yes, it has been a big journey, and I've been an avid student and studier, and I always say if I could have been paid to study, I'd be in heaven. And I never stopped studying, but I did. I became a naturopath, and those skills I used in clinic only for a short time, but they were invaluable skills in raising my children. And I'm very proud of the way that I was able to raise them, using the skills that I learned as a naturopath. And I studied functional nutrition, and I did all these different things, and I always imagined that was where my career was going to go. I actually bought a flower farm because I was very passionate about being at home, and having not needing to put the kids in daycare. And so that was just one of my values. And so they were able to, play around my feet while I harvested flowers, and I did flowers for weddings, and we had little roadside stands. And I had this entrepreneurial spirit where I just always found a way to make things happen. But I struggled. I created courses, and I did all these different things with this very driving passion to support people with their health through, particularly through nutrition was my passion. But I just found it very difficult to reach people in the online space. And I'm sure that anybody out there that's created any sort of online business, it looks a whole lot easier than it actually is in reality. And I came across somebody that was teaching how to interview in order to grow audiences. And it appealed to me for lots of different reasons. One was that I just love speaking to people and learning their stories and gathering the wisdom and learning through story, and then being able to share it with other people. And what happened was that I really found my groove in that. And it's something that I was very, very passionate about, and it just came naturally. And so through doing that, I was able to, grow a significant audience. and then to serve that audience. Finally, I had an audience to serve, and that was, that's where things really took off.
Love that. And yes, you are the first podcast guest I have ever read who has the title of professional interviewer. And I was like, I want to sign up for that. I mean, that's a great job. I love that. So I thank you for diving in and unpacking that little piece too. And, in what you do, you come across so many different stories, different venues for offering information and knowledge. And clearly, you're such a lifelong student. Nobody listening thinks there's a shortage of information. In fact, the opposite is probably true.
Yeah.
There's no shortage today of coaches. I remember when I first started calling myself a coach in the late 90s, people thought football. I mean, they were like, what are you talking about? But now there's coaches and courses and, anything you want at your fingertips. What do you believe is the gap between where we are and where we want to be? If we have the steps sitting there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's, well, I know that it is having, a clear vision of where you want to end up. And that might sound a bit flippant, but the reality is that, and I think particularly in your space, in the fitness space, is, and for me, nutrition and there is no shortage of information. We know what we need to do. We know why it's important. We know the difference it's going to make in our life. But when I use the analogy of planning a wedding, because I think that this is something that every woman, whether you've been married or not, can relate to this analogy. And that is, once you get engaged, you create in your mind first this magical picture of your wedding day and this one amazing day. You know what you're going to wear. You know that you're going to be the healthiest and most glowing you can possibly be. You know who you're going to be surrounded by. You know what you're going to eat. You know the car you're going to drive in. Like every detail is planned with such passion and excitement. And then you set about bringing that one day to life. And we get in the best shape of our life. We dress the best we ever do. We do everything to create this magical picture. And there's lots of hard steps along the way. We have to stretch ourselves financially. There's the exercise and eating better and, all the different things that come into making sure that we feel like $1 million on our wedding day. We do that for one day. Then why don't we do that for our life? And that's really what I think of as vision boarding. And people have all sorts of different reactions to vision boarding. But, if you're planning that wedding, you're going to get it down on paper. You've got a picture of the cake and the dress and the location, whether that's in a paddock with gumboots and blue jeans is the perfect wedding for somebody, and somebody else it's the I call it the Pavlova dress, the big fluffy white dress and a castle on a hill. Whatever that is for you, whatever that perfect picture is for you, you get so attached to that, and it pulls you up and forward through the difficult things that you have to do to bring that vision to life. And I think when we get into our life story, particularly for, when we get into our 50s, even, late 40s, we really tend to start just going through the motions. We've been doing this thing called life for so long. And my experience is that it just, you wake up and you bump through the next day and you bump through the next day without a really clear picture of where you're going. And I think that is the downfall. That's where life tends to slide into feeling less fulfilling, less meaningful, less passionate. And so if we can create that really exciting vision, what is it going to mean for your life if you get in the best shape you've ever been in? I saw a video from Jane Fonda came up on my news feed this morning. She's doing some new promotion on moving, and I don't know how old she is now, Deborah, but she's
She's, I think, 82.
She is fabulous. I want to be in her shoes when I get to 82. So that's what I'm talking about. She's never stopped. She just keeps going, and she has purpose and passion and a mission and obviously a fabulous vision because she's doing what I want to, where I want to be at 82.
Oh yeah. So much so.
Yeah.
I love this whole idea and this concrete example that you give of a wedding day because as you're talking through it, I see in pictures and maybe I'm a visual learner, but actually I'm mostly kinesthetic, so anything though when you're going through that, I mean, I could literally see my version of that. But I want to say this because I've also been a life coach. I don't use that term because it sounds like God to me, but for over 20 years. And one of the absolute most difficult questions I've ever asked women for them to answer is, what do you want?
I know.
How do you pull that out, girl?
Tiny step by tiny step. And the way that I address this is it doesn't happen all in one fell swoop. And, as we go through life, so from the moment, that we have comprehension of messages that we receive, and I guess it's not even comprehension because so much of it is subconscious. But if you think about, you get, starting to, in Australia, we call it kindergarten, those earliest years of school. And you start to layer yourself with messages. So she's introverted or extroverted, she's too quiet or she's too loud. And then, by the time we leave school, you've got a clear picture of you're either sporty or not sporty, artistic or not artistic, academic, smart or not smart, popular or unpopular, like the endless messaging that we receive. And I talk about it like a bit like the layers of an onion. And we just keep accumulating these layers that we then use consciously and unconsciously to determine who we are in the world and what we're actually capable of, what's possible for us. We've decided because we didn't get a certain mark when we left school that you could never do a certain career. And unless you are surrounded by people that start to peel back those layers and encourage you to question what is actually possible for you, then we can carry those messages that we received in high school through our 20s, our 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, all the way through and never peel back those messages and question them. And so through doing the work that I do in vision building, we get to start peeling those back with curiosity. Just, well, what if you tried that? What if something else was actually possible? And, my job as a coach really is to hold that safe space to explore what's possible and, trying simple things like dressing differently. And perhaps, for me, one of my big changes in the last 12 months was going grey. And I will, if time permits, use this as a great example in that when I first decided to stop dyeing my hair, I was worried because it was like, I don't want to look old. These were all messages that I'd accumulated that needed to be peeled back. So I didn't want to look old. I didn't want to look like I was no longer somebody worth listening to. How's that for a really sad that so many women have? Because we have these messages that once you get grey and get older, your value diminishes, which is just so wrong. But I had these messages. So I decided to shift those messages for myself and to start looking for different possibilities. And so I went hunting, and Instagram was a fabulous place to go hunting.
Yes. Yeah.
Were amazing examples of women who were vital and fabulous and rocking grey hair. And so that's where I shifted my focus. That's where I started to peel back some of those belief systems and allowed myself to just go grey with a sense of, feeling really beautiful doing it.
Wow. Very cool. You're
Yeah.
my hero. Yeah. I'm next. I've contemplated that, but I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready for that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting. It's an interesting journey, but a great way to just start looking at our mindsets around these things and the things that we've been conditioned to
Mhm.
believe and conditioned to see as normal.
What would you say? So, this is like halftime, right? For you. So, what would you say is the most important lesson you've learned in your first 50 years?
Personal responsibility. And it
Mm.
doesn't sound sexy, but oh my goodness, it is life changing. And I didn't really have a concept. I don't know if I didn't have a concept, but I didn't never heard anybody articulate it until I did a leadership training actually in the US. I flew over about 5 times in 2019. I did a leadership training, and it really was just taking the next step in peeling back so many layers. But I realized at that time that I just spent a lot of time being in victim mode. I was this way because my husband walked away and because of this. And, I was tired and unhappy because I was raising 4 children and, I was on my own and all these different things. And I just blamed the externals and circumstances for my ability to be, really healthy and happy. And once I understood, and it was, articulated in this way, that I am 100% responsible for my life. I am responsible for the fact that whether or not I'm happy, I am responsible for my health. And if I want life to be a certain way, it is absolutely up to me. That personal responsibility is life-changing. Really grabbing hold of it. It is life-changing. And I wish that somebody had inserted this into my brain when I was much, much, much younger.
Mm.
But it's never too late. It's never too late. And yeah, so now approaching life with that filter over my eyes, it is a very different experience. Much more, it really is the definition of being empowered.
I so love that. And you may have already hinted at the answer to this question, but you talk a lot about laying the foundation for a healthy and a happy life. Can you tell me and listeners, what is that foundation made of?
Perspective is massive.
Mm.
How we view what we have is a really big part of that. So it is the mindset. It is the mindset work. And as a life coach, Deborah, I know that you are well and truly aware of this. We don't want to hear it, and people don't particularly want to think about this as being one of the most important things, because once again, it doesn't sound all that sexy, but our mindset, how we think about things, determines our experience of life. So that's first. And then, of course, it is how we feed our bodies, how we move our bodies, the water that we drink, and the connection to nature, connection to other people, and connection to who we are, that inner voice that is actually wiser than the one that runs in our head, that inner intuition that we learn how to, trust again, for those that have been taught to ignore that because somebody else is always going to be wiser than you. We get to undo that belief system and come back to trusting that intuition. And those things are the foundation for a happy, healthy life.
So well said. Okay, I would love to circle back to you as professional interviewer. So You notice my little twang on that. Okay. But you have hosted some amazing events, and I feel like you really are speaking to women in midlife, and maybe specifically moms, maybe not everybody moms, but talk a little bit about that and how you've stumbled on this is your why or your purpose. And I know you have something coming up, so I'd love to talk a little bit about what is that, and what what is the ideal candidate for attending. What is she like? What is she thinking right now?
So, for the event that I have coming up, More Extraordinary Every Day, if we go back to that, example of a wedding, it is about really creating a different picture of what's possible. And the idea was planted in my mind. My husband, who's 58, and I at the movies, and we saw an advertisement for a retirement village for people 50 plus. And I just had this moment. I felt like somebody wrapped their hands around my heart and just squeezed it. And people have different ideas about retirement homes, I'm sure, but to me, it's like God's waiting room. It's where you go when you just can't perhaps look after yourself anymore, and you just waiting for the end. And the idea that people are being persuaded to move into retirement villages at 50, and surround yourself with people who are on the downward slide rather than embracing, that Jane Fonda mentality of there's still so much to live for. More Extraordinary Every Day is about creating this picture of we are, at 50, perhaps we're only just hitting the halfway mark, and we've brought this enormous amount of life experience and a wealth of wisdom with us. And now we get to, use that to create the most extraordinary chapter of our lives, moving on, 50s and 60s, 70s and 80s. There's a heck of a lot left, and so much that we can contribute in making the world, whether it's the world inside our homes or the world at large, a better place. But to do that, there's lots of little things that we need to do, and you're the master at movement, and we've got nutrition and getting our hormones back on track. There's that side of it, and then there's the side of how are we dressing our bodies and how much self-love and self-care are we doing to really honor this amazing body that we've all been gifted, and looking after it so that we can continue to thrive well into our 80s and hopefully beyond.
So good. And it sounds so rich, like you've got all the bases covered. What is there one or two that you could tease a little deeper, that topics that you're going to be talking about without giving away the farm?
Yeah, look, I think there's a few of the big ones, and I've pulled out the things that I tend to hear from the women in my community. One of them is this endless frustration with weight gain that happens through perimenopause and menopause. And it feels like a battle between our emotions and the scales. And, it just feels like something that is a needed topic. So we're going to look at how particularly stress is a big driver of weight gain. We're going to look at skincare, so skincare redefined and the real secrets to glowing skin. We're going to look at movement, of course, and saying goodbye to your inner critic and hello to self-acceptance and lasting love. Definitely plenty of talk about self-love and how we can, just up the ante on that a bit. So they're just some of the topics.
So love it. Love, love, love. Yes. Okay. So, and we're going to share the link for that. And tell me the title again, because I think it is so telling.
More Extraordinary Every Day.
Mm-hmm. Love it. And there's no suggestion that there's anything lacking right now, and there's no suggestion that you're going to perfect or perfection. It's just such a great title. Love it. All right. So the link to that, everyone, will be in the show notes. And Edwina, the one thing I'm going to ask you is probably hardest questions of the day. So you're sitting down, and rarely do I say that to anybody, but Is there a question I should have asked you?
Oh, that's interesting.
My mother would say that about something she didn't like, but yes, okay.
Nothing is springing to mind. Nothing is springing to mind. When I'm talking to and interviewing other people, I always think it's really
Mm,
helpful to sort of bullet point it, to get back the really, when you listen to something for half an hour, you tend to lose the things that were most pertinent that you can take away. And I'm
mhm,
very passionate about, as we've touched on the fact that there is so much information, there is so much knowledge out there, and I look at it a little bit like a knowledge obesity. We're gorging on information, we're gorging on inspiration, but taking that and actually putting it into action is the step that often gets missed. And it's the most important thing. So, for the audience listening to this, if you take away from this just putting that filter of personal responsibility over your eyes, and it always, I've got these bumper stickers, I call them, and one of them is no fault, blame, guilt, shame. When I talk about not coming from victim mode, we all do that at different times, feeling like we're the victim of something that somebody did to us, or, of our health, or something that's happened. And when we put this beautiful filter of, if it is to be, it's up to me, this personal responsibility, to me, it gives me that sense of really wanting to straighten my spine and lift my chin and think, right, if I want life to feel absolutely amazing, how do I look for, or who do I surround myself with that is living examples of where I want to go, and getting that clear picture of what I want to create unapologetically and just going after it.
love that. Such a great summary. Thank you so much.
Your pleasure.
All right, listeners, it is now your turn. So if you've got a question you wish I would have asked, and I know that you're intrigued, first of all, yes, it is the accent. However, she would be endearing without it. She's got such a great story. She's come so far. And then look at her turning around and putting her hand out to say, you too, right? You too. So I'm going to give you 2 links right now to remember. If you're driving, do not try to write this down. All right. We have you covered, but the show notes is going to be most important. flipping50.com/interviewer. And in that, we'll have the link, and it's flipping50.com/extraordinary. And that's where you'll go if you want to register and be there with me and all these other fantastic women, providing you with kind of hope and optimism and looking up for ideas as opposed to looking down.
Yeah.
So, what are you waiting for? Let's start flipping 50 today.